Hello, good morning, and we are once again here. Today's the first day of the month of Adar, Sheni, the second month of Adar. 2 weeks to Purim, 6 weeks to Passover. That's tomorrow night, 6 weeks from tomorrow night. How about that? All right, let's say hello to all those brave souls who have arrived here this morning. We'll turn to my right and say hello to Phyllis.
Good morning. Welcome.
There you go.
Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hi. Hi, Mom.
Hello.
All right, those are the ones who are lucky to be here today. Those of you who didn't come, see you next week, I hope. This discourse began in the verse, which is in the portion of Mishpatim in the middle of the second book of the Torah, book of Exodus. And the book over there is describing the Jewish people arriving in the land of Israel. And it says that there will not be any barren woman, and people will have good health, and people will also be sustained. And previously it said, if you serve God, if you worship God, He will bless your bread. In other words, we'll have plenty of sustenance. So all three blessings are covered. All three blessings are covered in this description of being in the land of Israel. The blessing of children, the blessing of health, and the blessing of sustenance. So everyone will be blessed. So the condition to all of this is to serve God, to worship God. Va'avadatem, avoda. Avoda means worship, or like service, not just accomplishing something, but working out, working in a way that it takes effort and strength to serve God that way. And he wanted to know, what does it mean to serve God? What does that mean to serve, to work out, to worship God? And also, does God really need, is it really necessary for somebody to work themselves like this? Does God need our work? Does he really need this? And if, he's setting up these conditions. I'll be nice to you if you're nice to me, but boy, if you're not, it doesn't sound God-like. That's human-like. We have feelings, and if our feelings are hurt, then we tend to shut down. We tend not to react, or to respond, or we do it differently if our feelings are hurt, because we just feel that we don't deserve, that other person doesn't deserve our attention in whatever area it might be. Is God like that? Is that what that doesn't sound like? That sounds trivial, juvenile. Doesn't sound God-like. And besides, we say in the prayers all the time that He keeps on forgiving us. Forgive us, forgive us, forgive us. We're saying it every day. And the prophet says that He'll forgive you. It's not like it's bothering Him. He doesn't get angry like you would imagine a person getting angry, or an animal responding, reacting crazily. So he began to discuss this in Kabbalistic terms. We spent quite a while talking about how the flow of God comes, and from what level, where does it begin? We have the regular flow, the regular energy of God that's out there, that every aspect of this world is geared towards that flow. So the stone looks the way it looks because it has a certain soul, the way God created it, and that's what sustains it. And the things that grow have a little bit more complicated souls because they're living, so then they're moving, and there's a lot more going on there. And the same thing with animals, and then of course you come to humans. That is the regular flow thing. No one has to do anything in order to get that to happen. It happens. It's happening. That's what we call nature. Nature is God's way of hiding Himself behind whatever facade it is, whether it's the inanimate, lifeless material of this world, or it's the vegetation, or it's the animal, or it's the human. Then there's a second level, and that's called the surrounding level. The Kabbalah calls it surrounding. Surrounding means not that it surrounds and encompasses, but it means that it's a transcendent level. It's not the natural order. It's not the nature. It's not the way things are. It's what we should strive to and aspire to. It's the higher level of godliness which we are created, human beings, exclusively to reach to. In other words, we have what we have. We are created with what we are created, like anything else, which is what we share with the rest of the world. But then there is a higher level towards where we strive to. So if it's for Jewish people, it's 613 commandments are in the Torah. Every one of those gives us another connection to a higher level. Whether if it's the non-Jewish people of the world, there are the 7 Noahide laws and all that tributaries that stem from those laws, which are also quite encompassing. So each one has their mission. Each individual human being has a mission from God in this world to arrive at a transcendent level. That transcendent level doesn't conform to the laws of nature. Nature is all the other previous levels. Nature is what's out there, but that necessarily usually conceals God. You have to work hard to find God in nature. Nature looks very natural. That's what nature means. It's there all the time. We breathe. We don't even pay attention to the lungs that we have. A person takes millions of breaths, and we don't even think about it. And all this breathing is there in order to give oxygen to the blood flow that goes through how many thousands of 66,000 miles or something of blood vessels, and if you put them all one next to each other, so that every little aspect of our body should be continued to be oxygenated, and that's the only way we could survive. We don't pay attention to that stuff. It's just natural. It never stops. Our heart doesn't stop beating. If it does, we're in big trouble. That's not natural. So we don't even pay attention to that stuff. I remember very well, I was having some pain here, or I wasn't sure what it was, some pressure. So I decided to have a stress test. It was the summer of 3 years ago, before I even came here. I wrote, obviously, a good Shabbos email about this. And I went to my favorite heart doctor, a good friend, and he puts me on this treadmill to start, that's to stress me out. Mm-hmm. And he says, I'm going to turn up the pressure here, and you're going to end up moving your feet sooner, faster and faster. And it was just what happened. Then he got to, I think, level 8 or 9. He says, this is where sports athletes go. He says, you're fine. If you're still keeping up with it, then you're okay. Then he went and did one of these cardiogram, and then sonogram, where you can actually see the heart. Mm-hmm. And for the first time in my life, I saw my heart beating. That was unbelievable, because that's been with me and hasn't stopped. Thank God, for however many decades it has been. When you see your own heart, and you know that little organ controls your life, literally, it has your life, and it's quite sobering. But you don't think of that. Why would you think of it? We lose focus on these things because they're natural. They're here all the time. There is a blessing that is designed to be said in the mornings, and then every time after a person fulfills his or her bodily needs. And that's the blessing after the bathroom. It's a pretty long blessing, and it says there, if you well know, God, that if any of these ventricles were to be blocked, or any of these blockages were to be opened, we wouldn't be able to stand here for even 1 minute. Thank you, God, for creating me this way and giving me the ability to function. That blessing all of a sudden took on a whole new meaning. But that's natural. We don't pay attention to that because it's nature. It's natural. It continues to happen. The transcendent of nature, however, is the goal where we strive to go. But for that, we have to do transcendent things, which is the mitzvahs, the commandments that we have. That's why we have these commandments designed to be connected to God, the higher level of God. And incidentally, the rest of the world also receives its elevation through us. When we ingest, or when we use the energy from that wheat that created the bagel, from that milk that created the cream cheese, or from the water, or from the animal that ate grass and then the earth in the grass and everything, all of that is elevated when we, human beings, take that food and ingest it, and then take the energy that we have received from the food and utilize it for positive things. So that's the other level of God, the surrounding level, we call it. But then there's a third level that he identified in this thing, which took us a while to get through, and that is the level of the essence of God. The essence of God, not anything that projects from God, but the essence of God. And he used the example of the sun. As soon as the first ray of the sun comes out of the sun, it's now external. It's now past the sun. It's a light of the sun. The essence of the sun, however, is a fire. It's what is it? It's the essence of it, of everything. It's the essence of all the light that's out there. And when that sun decides to disappear, there is no more light. There's nothing. No more rays. No more warmth. No more heat. No more anything. Similarly, we talk about the essence of God, which is like the sun. And then anything that comes from God, any energy that extends from God, as high up as it may be, it's from God, not the essence. And so he said, the essence of God is removed. That doesn't need anything. The essence of God has everything it needs. Because it's God. It's that God that we believe in, the all, everything, the whatever it might be, that is the essence of God. The essence of God is infinite. It doesn't relate to time and to space and to what we do, what we don't do. It's the essence of God. As soon as you say you need to serve God, that means God needs something. If God needs something, then he's lacking it before we come and give it to him. That God doesn't lack anything. The God that we believe in is not a God that gets angry, because if he did, that means he needed something from us and he was upset that we didn't do it or that we did it the wrong way. The God of that essence of God doesn't get happy, because if he what do you mean? He was unhappy before, or he wasn't happy before? That essence of God has everything it needs. But because God is the goodness, wants to share godliness with others, he designed the universe and put people in that universe and put everything around the people to make the universe what it is, so that we could exist and we could become godly. That already is a projection. That is where God needs our service, because he designed it to be that way. God wanted that we should possess godliness. We should share godliness. Which part of God wanted that? The inner part of God, the essence of God, wants to be good. As soon as it comes out of God, though, there is a design how to be good. How should it work? In other words, let's go back to the sun. The essence of the sun doesn't need anything. It's just a ball of fire, a ball of energy. But once its rays go out, it wants to illuminate. It wants to shine. It wants to give. It wants to project. It wants to give whatever it has. So similarly, the essence of God doesn't need anything. It just had the desire to share. To share some of how godliness is great. And it wants, goodness always wants to give. So it gives. Once the projection begins, though, then it becomes a design. How can a person best become godly? Then it becomes a need. Then there's nachas. I feel good now. That's where the Rebbe was going with all of this. So when the Torah says, "And you worship me, and you get all the things that are right," that is the level of the transcendent level, where you can worship God, but to affect the essence of God, that doesn't need that. There's no need there. There's nothing to affect over there. That essence just wanted to share. That's it. Now, he pointed out, and this is where we're holding now, he pointed out that in the narrative where the Torah talks about this promise, it says, and you shall serve your God, the Lord your God, worship, avodah, work out the Lord your God, and I and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will remove the illness and sickness from it with you. So first he talks about in a third party and worship God. It's as if the Torah in general talks in a third party. And God spoke to Moses. Who's writing that? If Moses is writing that, he should write, and God spoke to me. If God is writing it, says, I spoke to Moses. It doesn't say that. It's a third party. And God spoke to Moses. It's as if someone is recording something. Now, who wrote that? Moses wrote it. Who told him what to write and how to write it? God. Yet they chose to write it, and God chooses to write it in a third party. Most of the Torah is written that way, except in the book of Deuteronomy. The word Deuteronomy means speak. It's words. And these are Moses' words, so a lot of times it says, and I went here, and I said this, and I did that. The rest of the Torah, though, where we are now, the first 4 books, almost all the time says, and God said that, and God said this, and Moses did this, and Moses did that, in a third party. All of a sudden, over here it says, and if you worship God, God will bless your thing, and I will remove. Who's I? You're talking about God in the third person, and in the same verse, all of a sudden it says I. So he says, from here you see that there are 3 parties here. There is the first party, then there's the second party, then there's I. First person, second, third person narrative. There's God, there's Moses, and then there's I. That's the essence of God. That's where we were. Right. So we're going to look at the paragraph on page 40, which begins with the words from this. We already did this, but we'll do it again, just to get the hang of it, because we're holding it the next paragraph, really. From page 40, from this it is understood. From this it is understood that the concept, you got it? You're not in page 40. Here's page 40 is here. 40, 41.
Oh, from looking.
40 and 41 are on the same sheet. From this it is understood that the concept of avodah applies. Avodah means to worship, to serve, to work out. This concept of working for God applies not only to the level of God's name, Havaya. Havaya is the transcendent level of God, but it's connected to the world. Havaya means to create. And there's the God's great name of Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, just written backwards. It's Havaya, it's the same letters, Hey, Vav, Yud, Hey, just backwards of Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. And Havaya means to, and that is the name of God, that has past, present, and future in the same. So we're talking about a God that's transcendent. So this is the concept of Avodah applies not only to the level of God's name, Havaya, but also to the narrator of the Torah, the quintessence of the infinite, blessed be He. I just said that the third party, or the essence of God, doesn't need anything. But here he's saying that the concept of service, of worship, does apply to that level. Avodah causes not only that He shall bless your bread and your water through the name of Havaya, which is the transcendent name, but not the essence of God, but also, and I will remove your illness. That third level, I will remove, which represents the essence of God, because He connects us in the same context of do this, do that, worship God, and then this will happen, that will happen, and then I will remove. When He throws in that I, meaning the essence of God, it really seems to indicate that the essence of God does react to our service. I just finished explaining, it's not me, I'm just repeating from here, that the essence of God is completely remote, and removed doesn't need anything. Now he's saying that if you worship God, He will bless your bread with third party. He will, there will be no this, and I will remove sickness from among you. I? Who's the I? No more third parties. They're talking to the essence now. And it's all in the context of serve God, worship God. So worship God seems, yes, to have a connection to the essence of God. Right? Through the quintessence of the infinite, blessed be He. So then here comes the next paragraph, the question. This requires further explanation, since regarding spiritual levels that are higher than Ishtalshalut, that are remote and removed, the verse states, if you are righteous, what do you give to Him? As mentioned earlier. The book of Isaiah says, you think you're such a big macha, huh? You think you're so special. You think you're so smart. Well, let me tell you something, says the prophet. If you're righteous, nothing happens to him. And if you're wicked, nothing happens to him. You don't pipe down, get off that high horse. You're not that great. Not you. One should not think and consider themselves so special. You see all the greatest of the great, even Moses, the ultimate leader, the person with whom God communicated the Torah and all of that, keeps on saying, humble, and he's losing himself in the essence of God. The more he knows God, the more he feels completely irrelevant, inadequate. And this is consistent throughout the Torah. The end of the Torah says, and this was a man who knew God face to face. The greatest, there was never a prophet like him. That's how the Torah finishes. In its eulogy on Moses. And Moses is the most humble of people. He had the most to be proud of. Somebody who can have a relationship with God. The Torah describes a few times how he says, the people come to him, they say, what should we do? He says, hold on a second, I'll ask God. Like as if, my friend next door, I'll ask. Like, who talks like that? And yet he's considered the most humble. The Torah says these words. And Moses was the most humble of people, of all the people on the earth. So the prophet is saying, you think you're such a big smart aleck, Weisenhauser over here. You built a big empire, even in spiritual matters. Who do you think what's it for? And you notice all the great leaders, the greater the leader, the more humble they are. Doesn't mean they're more downtrodden. When they have to stand up for something, they'll stand up. When the rebellion came to Moses, he made the earth open up and swallow them up. And so on and so forth. He stood up to anything that was opposed to his message of leadership to his people. That he would stand up for. At the same time, they were very humble. They didn't consider themselves as anything special. They considered themselves as doing what they needed to do. And if someone else would come along, they may have done it better. But always saw that. On the day before the Rebbe suffered a stroke, 22 years ago last week, which basically closed up the wellspring of leadership in Torah. And he lived for another couple of years, but it was not nearly the same. Nothing was the same. Still many blessings and many miracles, but it wasn't. There was no communication verbally. One day before, he stood for 7 hours giving out the dollars as he always did to meet people and give tzedakah to people. And somebody came along and said, you gave me a blessing, and it really, really worked. And, it was a big problem. I don't remember all the details now. But I have it on video here. You gave me all this blessing, and I got through it. And I came here to thank you. So I said, what do you me? It's God's blessing. It had nothing to do with me. He says, yeah, but you're the one who gave me the blessing. The person insists. And the Rebbe said, all I did was pray to God. What are you talking to me? And he was very insistent on that. And anytime anybody came, at the most he would have said, okay, now that the blessing worked, we expect a lot more from you now. There would never be, oh, thank you, I really needed that. I needed to hear that. I like this compliment. It was, what are you talking about? What's that to do with me? And they're talking about a person that the whole entire world, Jews and non-Jews alike, would come all the time, flock to him for his blessings. And he would give them freely. And they would be amazing. This would be miracles. But the greater they are, the more they realize that all they are is a conduit. It's just a channel. And that's what the prophet says. If you're righteous, what do you think you're doing to him? Is that the essence of God doesn't need your righteousness. And if you're wicked as well, recognize God and recognize your position is what the prophet is saying. And we are, as we say on Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre evening. One of the songs that we sing in the repertoire there is, we are like an axe in the hand of the one who chops wood. We are like a steering wheel in the hands of the captain of the ship, and so on. We're here to fulfill a certain mission, and at any moment, anything can happen. Anything can happen throughout the world. Russia can just go into Ukraine overnight, and so much can happen in a second. You think things are the way you think they are, and they don't. They don't work out that way. So that's what the prophet is saying. You don't affect the essence. But if that's the case, then what's he talking about? Worshiping God, and that the essence of God is affected. What does that mean? This is the question, chapter 5. It can be said, and this is the answer, that the teaching of our sages, they teach as follows. For what does the Holy One, blessed be he, care? That line of what does he need, what does he care, why would he require any of this, refers to avodah itself, i.e., the details of the service. In other words, all the details of, should we light the candle this way or that way? Should we put on tefillin this way or that way? Or should we eat gefilte fish, liver, and soup and the cholent? Or should we eat only kugel and all of that? The important things in life. These are the details of how to serve God. The times and this, all of these details. The general service of God, though, so God doesn't need all of these details. He gets exacting things. That's what can be said. However, the outcome of the avodah, which is performed, in order that creation be refined, that even a mere creation and a lowly creation at that becomes refined and elevated, is in effect a transformation of something into nothing. What he's saying over here is that the details of how you go about doing it, that is the level of God, where God says, however you get to it, that doesn't affect that level of God. It certainly is important. The details are all detailed in the Torah, so it must be important. But what is really counts to the essence of God is not how we do it, but is what happens as a result. So if we transform, however low the thing is, we transform it to holiness, to elevation, that affects the essence of God. Why? Because until that point, it wasn't elevated. Now that you've elevated, you've done something very, it brings a lot of nachas to God. So let's just say, for example, if we had a house, and the house needed rebuilding, the house needed redecorating, whatever. And you called in 3 or 4 different companies. And one company says, if I break down that wall, and if I paint this wall, it'll be beautiful. The other company, and that will be $50,000. The other company comes along and says, I don't have to break down this wall, but that wall. And if I paint not that wall, paint this wall, and for $50,000 I can do that. Okay, nice. So now the money is the same, the details are different. So what details do we want? We just want the outcome. It doesn't really matter how you get to it. It's what happens as a result of it. And once you get into the house, nice. However you chose to do it, and if they did it right, you say, nice, good. Similarly, the essence of God doesn't worry about the details. It's the level afterwards that maps out the details of how we should go about to do this. It's the transcendent level, not the essence level of God, that needs us to eat the kugel and this and that particular time and do this and wear that and that kind of thing. The essence of God doesn't ask you how to do it. But when the results come in, it enjoys it. Or it says, nah, could have done a better job.
Hmm.
That doesn't give me the nachas that I was looking for. That's what he's saying here. Let's read it again. However, the outcome of the avodah, which is performed, in order that creation be refined, that's why we do our service, that even a mere creation, just something that's lowly, and a lowly creation at that, becomes refined and elevated, is in effect the transformation of something into nothing. In other words, of something becoming godly now. And it has an impact even on the quintessence of the infinite. So the outcome, the result, the final outcome, that's what's good. You won the game 17-15. I don't care how you got to it. I don't care about the ERA of this pitcher or of that pitcher or the stats. You won the game. That's another win. Fine. Now you're closer to your goal. That's the essence of God. Doesn't care about the games. It cares about the outcome of the games. You don't go to Yankee Stadium to watch baseball. You go to Yankee Stadium to watch the Yankees win the game of baseball. Hopefully. That's the point. You want to know what the results are. How you got there, what the details were. That's really it's nice, good. But did they win? Thank God. That's all you want to know.
That's true.
There's some who are very into the games. They say, yeah, but the pitcher gave up too many runs, and they can't enjoy the victory because of the problem. So if you win 2-0, you say, why couldn't these lousy bums hit some baseballs and score some runs? They want to see a 15-0 win. That the pitcher is on the game. It doesn't happen like that every day. But the casual fan says, did they win? Good. Next game. It's what the outcome is. The results are what are important. 42. It is regarding this that the verse states, and you shall serve Havaya your God. Serve God, and I will take illness away. Referring specifically to the quintessence of the infinite blessed be He.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Why did he give us illness?
Who's he?
Same person that's taking it away.
So that's a question that's been asked all along, or in a different way. Why do the righteous suffer?
Is it not Adam's fault?
Adam?
What?
Adam and Eve, when they
Yeah. On Tuesday, we missed the paragraph this week of the description of the class on Tuesday, but for those who don't remember, we're talking about Isaiah 53. And they seem to make a big deal out of that chapter. That's the proof of whatever they want to prove. And Isaiah happened to be a Jewish rabbi, a Jewish leader who had no idea or inkling of anything that would come 1,000 years later. And he wasn't talking to him, he was talking to us. And it's all about us. And how it's going to work out, that we'll hopefully, with God's help, we'll discuss this on Tuesday evening. While we're there, we'll discuss that as well. Is Adam the source of all problems? And just to give you something else to think about, in the 10 Commandments, it says that God will exact punishment on the next generations. Later on in the Torah, it says the children don't die for the sin of the father, and the father doesn't die for the sin of the children. So what's going on? Could Adam be held responsible for any of this? And this is connected to a story that happened to me on the way to South Africa 10 years ago when a priest came to. I've told the story before, but I'll enjoy saying it again. When a priest came to see me at the back of the plane while I was davening, and told me about how we'll all die because of Adam. Anyway,
I once, years back, I had the experience of listening to Rabbi Krishna.
yes.
Bad people.
Why bad things happen to good people?
Okay. He explained that illness and disease is created is a human element. It's not, God didn't do that. It just came about as he had no control over disease.
I beg to differ, but
Really?
he's not talking about the same God that I believe in.
Oh,
Human illness comes from things. I could say that about anything. Then why have a problem with God? I could say anything comes from God. The Holocaust happened by humans, and that accidents happen because of humans, and disease and illnesses happen because of humans, and the fact that this guy is a bum and a no good Nick, and then this also it's humans, and the fact that Putin goes and invades another country, it's humans. Till what point do you say God takes over here? Where we're pushing God to? I disagree with Krishna completely, and he might have good ideas over there, but that's not one of them. You can't say that God doesn't make things happen. You can say, I don't understand why God makes it happen. That's it. When somebody can say, I don't know, that's a nice way of saying, I don't know. Until I know, I don't know. Until I'm told, I don't know. The problem is these people know everything, and they say this. The reason why it happens is because humans. This one's going to say the reason why it happens is because a bunch of sinners in this world, a bunch of bums in this world. That's why. Everybody else is causing everything. It's all everybody else's fault. We can't control what happens to us. We can control how we respond to what happens to us. As somebody wrote in the Good Shabbos email about that bucket. I don't know if you read that story. That's a true story, by the way. It's a funny story. It's a joyous story, but that's an unbelievable perspective. The bucket, we can't pray. Oh, well, now we have to serve God. By not praying, let's do it with joy. Finished. What he means is that the bucket seems to be the problem. The bucket is the way out of the problem. He took the problem and turned that into the way out of it. That's a very difficult thing to do. Even his older brother was a saintly, righteous man, didn't see it that way. It's not like, everybody should be able to see it. It's almost impossible. When we're facing this challenge, whether it's illness, whether it's work-related, family-related, so many things, we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Go tell a young widow whose husband was murdered and he's not coming home tonight, and to young orphans, go tell them, go dance. That's this is the tough part of the world, of life. So to say it doesn't come from God, that's a cop-out. That's what that is. That's just saying, okay, there is no God in this level, and so we don't have to worry about God now. And why would that make anybody feel any better? It's like the Rebbe told Eli Wiesel. Told me, he told this to me personally when he was here a few years ago. He said that he told the Rebbe that how can I believe in God? I saw the devil with my own eyes. He was in Auschwitz, he was there. And God said, so who do you want to say that did it? A human being did it? You can't believe in God, so you believe in humans? Who do you want to believe in now? So who do you have your faith in? Okay, so human beings did this, not God. God didn't make it happen, and we can't believe in God. Okay, so now we believe in who? In Hitler? In Putin? In Obama? What's the alternative here? So you have a problem. What kind of God is this? Good question. I don't know. And when you say I don't know, what you're saying is that cannot govern my life. What is the source of this? If I told you what the source is, what would happen then? Would it go away? Would the problem go away? If I told Eli Wiesel it was God and God did it for this reason, the pain and the suffering would still remain. It wouldn't take away anything. But God does promise in the Torah that when things are right and we're serving God properly, there will be no problems. That's what we wait for Mashiach. That's when problems disappear. Why do problems disappear? Because the world goes to where it should have been. This is not a normal world. The normal world is that when you serve God and you do things properly and you're good people, you're righteous people, you're kind, nice, whatever, holy, religious, then things are good. But this is what we call exile. And connected to Purim. The book of Esther says that night the sleep of the king was disturbed. the night in which Haman was building the gallows, which we was going to hang Mordecai on, that same night, chapter 6 of the book of Esther begins by saying, on that night the king's sleep was disturbed. And he couldn't sleep. So he told him, can you bring me the book of Chronicles, a history book that we have, the ledger, the diary that we have, and see, maybe there's a person who I have to honor, I have to thank. And the guy was reading the story of Mordecai who saved the king's life. And the king says, have we thanked this person? Have we done anything for him? And they said, no record over here. We haven't done anything for him. And morning came, and the king was very disturbed by this. And Haman walks in. He wants to ask permission to hang Mordecai. And the king says, before you ask me anything, what should I do to a person who the king wants to honor? Haman says, who would he want to honor more than me? He says, well, tell him to take a horse, the king's horse, he should wear the king's garments, put on the king's crown, and he should be paraded through Shushan. And the person leading that entourage should say, this is what should happen to the one who the king wishes to honor. So the king says, Haman, I need that favor from you. Please do that to Mordecai, because he saved my life. And that's where the whole thing turned. So the Talmud says that name of God doesn't appear in the entire book of Esther. The only book, no name of God appears at all. The word Esther means to be hidden. God is hidden there. The word Megillah, by the way, means to be revealed. A revealing of the hidden. So the Talmud says, anytime it says the king, it refers to God. You think this is a story playing out over here, but really it's a story playing out in the higher elements. What's happening over here? The king was sleeping. Who was the king? God. Sleeping? Huh? God sleeping? So it says in the book of Psalms that God woke up as though he was sleeping. In other words, when things are not right, it's like you're sleeping. When you sleep, so much that can't happen out there, all of a sudden can happen in your dreams. So we're dreaming right now. When we do the benching after the meal, we say we were like dreamers. When God returns the returnees back to Zion, it says, and we were like dreamers. What are we dreaming? We're dreaming because it's not right. What's not right? That the righteous are suffering. We don't know why it happens. But when things are not right, crazy things happen. Could you imagine? It's 65 years after the Holocaust and people are screaming to divest themselves from Israel because of the Palestinians are being persecuted. It's unbelievable. That's called Meshuggah. It's not like it's not true. It's false, completely false. It doesn't make any sense. And now they're saying not to kill any scientists in Iran who are trying to build nuclear bombs. Obama's telling them not to. What's going on over here? The world is going Meshuggah. That's called dreaming. That's the exile. Exile, a state of exile means things go crazy and they don't make any sense. But explaining them doesn't make them less painful or less Meshuggah. That's why Isaiah says in chapter 11 that on the day he comes, the day the Messiah comes, you will say on that day, thank you, God, for what you did, for the trouble. That is almost impossible. That means that God's going to explain things that are unexplainable. In our limited minds, we can't see what's going on here because it's dark. God is sleeping. And God says this in the Torah that during exile, I will hide my face. Double expression of hiding in the book of towards the end of the Torah. And I will hide my face on that day. And you will say, where is God? What's going on here? It's either words written in the Torah.
So is there nothing that can be said to Holocaust survivors that still have so much pain that they can't deal with life, with accepting God?
I don't know what I could have said to them 60 years ago. Only the Rebbe could have said what he did to Eli Wiesel. But what I can say to them today is plenty. I can say to them, thank you. That's the one thing we can say to every single survivor. Thank you. Because without them, we wouldn't have Judaism today. They came out of there and they rebuilt Judaism. They had Jewish children. They married Jewish women. They built synagogues. They built schools. They built homes. They built communities. These are the same people who went through it. That's the biggest miracle of all. That's what I could say to them today. And I have said it so many times. I've had Holocaust survivors break down when I've said that. Because people don't usually say that to them. They say, well, how was it, and what was life before, and how many children did your father have, and everything. All of these questions that we ask, because those are the ones, and what was it like in Auschwitz? But what we need to say to them is thank you. Because every single last one of them who survived and remained Jewish wanted to maintain Judaism, stayed and did it despite everything. They knew inside of them that their biggest victory against fascism and Nazism and anti-Semitism is to build another synagogue, to build another school, to have another Jewish child. They knew that, and they did it. And you know what? It is amazing what where we are today. That's a miracle. With this whole Meshuggah and the exile there, Israel, are you kidding me?
Chills from what you're saying.
I know.
It's a miracle. It's a pure miracle. Look what the world is saying today. It's all coming out now again. Isolate them. Divest. It's anti-Semitism. It's nothing less than that. It's not about Israel. It's about buying a big bowl of lokshen. That's what that is. About buying garbage from nothing. Nothing. It's false. You go to Israel. I've been to Israel many times. You go to Israel, you don't see that stuff. You'll see a proper, normal, nice, proper, good country, which is what we hope to do in end of May, early June 15, right? Joe,
Absolutely.
with God's help.
Yeah.
We'll be the ones. Knock on which wood. All right, anyway. The final paragraph here till chapter 6. This explains why the verse, and I will remove illness from your midst, is different from an earlier verse, I will put none of the diseases which I have brought upon the Egyptians upon you. Right after the Song of the Sea, when the Jewish people were really inspired, that could you imagine going through a dry bed of a sea that had been going till this day, it's still there. They were inspired to sing that song, which we say every single day in the daily prayers. It's in the daily prayers every day. We make a big deal out of it on the 7th day of Passover. That's the day that it happened, 7 days after they left Egypt. And after that, God says, even God seems to be very moved by this whole, how they reacted. And he took them to a place where there was no water, wasn't fresh, it was all contaminated water. And the people said, well, water we need to drink. And God said to Moses, take a tree, branch, and throw it into the water, and it'll become fresh all of a sudden by itself. Another miracle. And so they drink the water, and then God says, if you hearken to my words and listen to what I'm saying, what I'm trying to show over here is in 1 second I can turn this thing from bad to good, from contaminated to fresh. It's all about you following what I want you to follow. Have that relationship with me. And then he says, he concludes this statement, by any illness that I placed on the Egyptians, I won't place upon you. And all these plagues that they went through, I will not place on you, because I am God who heals you. That's how. In other words, I can heal, in a second, I can change everything around. That's the verse there. 2 portions later, he's saying what we are talking about here, that I will remove all sickness from you. So by the sea, he says, here he says, and I will remove illness from your midst. And by the sea, I will put none of the diseases which I have brought upon the Egyptians upon you. That means you won't get sick. We're saying the same thing, it seems, but it's worded differently. What's the difference between these 2 verses? So he says the verse, and I will put none of the diseases, which is the verse after the sea, connotes the possibility for disease, and the blessing is that this possibility will not be actualized. because I have diseases in my bag, but I won't put them on you. The ones that I did to Egypt, remember those problems? Oh, I have them, but I won't give them to you. However, in the verse, and I will remove illness, there is a greater novelty. In that even when there is actual disease, it's there. He took it out of his bag. Not just a potential for disease. He took it out. The disease will be removed. In order to remove a disease that already actually exists, there is a need for an even greater force. Once there's contamination, now you gotta fight. Preventive medicine is much easier than to destroy whatever was there. If you take your vitamins, then you won't have to take the antibiotics and all the other hard stuff that the body has to react to. So it takes a stronger force. This is the meaning of the verse, and I will take away, speaking directly to the second person. I will take away the essence of God, the deepest element of God, because it needs a stronger force, since this refers to the quintessence of the infinite. Blessed be He. So this is a very powerful perspective, that the essence of God is affected by what we do after we do it. The details of how we get to it, that's from a lower level. But we have the ability, the power, to affect the essence of God. That's a very powerful statement there. So whenever we do anything positive, whenever we do anything good, whenever we do anything that God asks of us to do, whether it's Shabbos or Yom Tov, whatever it might be, just telling the truth, be honest in business, or anything, all of that has an effect on the essence of God. That's what essence of God? The essence of God that can do anything in a second. Very powerful stuff.
How come I don't write it in plain English?
You mean how the Torah?
Then
How come
they
the
wouldn't be
Or
here.
even the rewrites.
How come,
Even the rewrites.
so how come the Torah doesn't state this?
Well, no. What I'm saying is, with all the Rebbe talking about this stuff,
Oh,
some of it is just so.
it's translation from Hebrew. So
Oh,
the Rebbe said this in Yiddish.
yeah.
Then people transcribed it in Hebrew. This is in 1952, and in the language of the Hasidic, the Hasidic vernacular. And so, in order to understand this, you have to study. It's a study. It's just like studying anything else. I know it might be, if you're reading this the way it is, in English, you might not understand what's going on.
Yeah.
I have 2 pairs and whichever
Well, hearing
one
it
they
explained
find.
is much better.
From
but-
the account, you can do that for me.